Morning has come, arise and greet the day. Dance with joy and sing a song of gladness. The light of hope it shines upon each face. May it bring faith to guide our journey home. A new day dawns, once more the gift is given. Wonder fills this moment shared together. The light of peace it shines upon each face. May it bring faith to guide our journey home. Open our eyes to see that life abounds. Open hearts to welcome it among us. The light of love it shines upon each face. May it bring faith to guide our journey home.
Good morning and welcome to Live Oak Unitarian Universalist Church. I'm Reverend Joanna. So glad that we can all be here today online, but somehow still connecting. If this is your first time with us, after the service, I invite you to go to liveoakuu.org, and you're going to see a lot of links that will hopefully be helpful to you, including a place where you can sign up for our weekly email newsletter. Also, if you click on the What's Happening page, you're going to see things that are happening this next week, including later today, an Exploring Membership class where you can come and learn more about Live Oak and Unitarian Universalism and ask some questions to see whether this is the community that you've been searching for. One of the things that we will talk about in that gathering is the history of the chalice. But for now, let me just tell you that it is part of Unitarian Universalist tradition to light a chalice at the beginning of our worship services and other gatherings. And so now for everyone, if you have a candle or a chalice near, I invite you to draw it towards you as we light our chalices together.
Just as long as I have breath, I must answer answer yes to love. Disappointment paced me through, still I kept on loving you. If they ask what I did best, tell them I said yes to love.
Good morning. My name is Carrie Krause. I'm the Director of Lifespan Faith Development here at Live Oak. Thank you so much for joining us this morning for worship. Today's big idea is Spite Fences by Paul Beckel. The story can be found in What If Nobody Forgave. Not too long ago, 4 neighbors were living together in peace and harmony. They liked to get together to play and sing and to have barbecue. They grilled out so often, in fact, that one of the neighbors built a permanent grill in her backyard. Now, these friends always liked to eat hamburgers when they barbecued. Now, some ate them with cheese, and some preferred only lettuce, and others, a few of them, liked big globs of steak sauce on their burgers. They liked the fact that they could all eat their hamburgers any way they wanted. One day, the neighbor with the grill got the job in another city and had to move away. As the remaining friends waved goodbye, they shed a few tears because they were sure that no one would ever be able to take the place of the friend who'd built the neighborhood grill. A few days later, a new neighbor moved in. The others watched carefully as the new neighbor moved in her things. They were delighted when she set up a grill that evening and she began to heat up some coals. She was going to fit right in. But wait a minute, where was the hamburger? The stranger placed something soft and flabby onto the grill. And as it cooked, it gave off an odor that was too unfamiliar to be pleasant. Phew, said the other neighbors. Everyone ran into their homes and locked the doors. The new neighbor soon came around knocking on doors to invite everyone to dinner. But the others, they pretended they weren't home. They called each other on the phone and said, "We've got to get rid of that new neighbor, or at least make sure her awful cooking smells don't pollute our backyards." They decided they would build fences around their backyards. Fences so tall that no awful smells would be able to reach them. Fences so high that sunbeams wouldn't shine into her windows or nourish her grass. Maybe, if they were lucky, the new neighbor would move away when her house got dark and her grass turned brown. Perhaps then the right kind of person would move in. And so these neighbors put up their fences that prevented even the tiniest beam of light from squeezing through. And then the neighbors waited to see what would happen. Unfortunately, they could no longer attend the barbecues they had so loved, but at least they didn't have to put up with that strange smell anymore. They'd been in such a hurry to put up the fences, however, that they soon had a number of problems. First of all, the fences were about as attractive as a clump of weeds. Second, the fences were so tall, they were very hard to paint. And finally, the fences were so heavy that they soon began to sag. One day, the fences collapsed with a boom, and the neighbors cautiously came out of their houses to see what had happened. The new neighbor was nowhere in sight. "Oh no," they gasped. "What if she's hurt?" Well, she wasn't hurt. She was gone. Now, the last time the neighbors had seen her was 2 weeks ago when she moved in. For all they know, she could have left that same day. the neighbors realized they'd gotten what they wanted, but they weren't happy about it. In fact, they were starting to think they had made a big mistake. The ending of this story is for you to decide.
The Open Society and Its Enemies by Karl Popper, 1945. The so-called paradox of freedom is the argument that freedom, in the sense of absence of any constraining control, must lead to very great restraint, since it makes the bully free to enslave the meek.
Less well known is the paradox of tolerance. Unlimited tolerance must lead to the disappearance of tolerance. If we extend unlimited tolerance even to those who are intolerant, if we are not prepared to defend a tolerant society against the onslaught of the intolerant, then the tolerant will be destroyed, and tolerance with them.
In this formulation, I do not imply, for instance, that we should always suppress the utterance of intolerant philosophies, as long as we can counter them by rational argument and keep them in check by public opinion. Suppression would certainly be unwise.
But we should claim the right to suppress them if necessary, even by force, for it may easily turn out that they're not prepared to meet us on the level of rational argument, but begin by denouncing all argument. They may forbid their followers to listen to rational argument because it is deceptive, and teach them to answer arguments by the use of their fists or pistols.
We should therefore claim, in the name of tolerance, the right not to tolerate the intolerant. We should claim that any movement preaching intolerance places itself outside the law, and we should consider incitement to intolerance and persecution as criminal, in the same way as we should consider incitement to murder or to kidnapping or to the revival of the slave trade as criminal.
This is where the party ends. I can't stand here listening to you and your racist friend. I know politics bore you, but I feel like a hypocrite talking to you and your racist friend. It was the loveliest party that I've ever attended. If anything was broken, I'm sure it could be mended. My head can't tolerate this bobbing and pretending. Listen to some bullet head, the madness that he's saying. This is where the party ends. I'll just sit here wondering how you can stand by your racist friend. I know politics bore you, but I feel like a hypocrite talking to you and your racist friend. Stand here listening to you kitchen to the bedroom to the hallway. Your friend apologizes, he could see it my way. He let the contents of your bottle do his thinking. Can't shake the devil's hand and say you're only kidding. This is where the party ends. I can't stand here listening to you and your racist friend. I know politics bore you, but I feel like a hypocrite talking to you and your racist friend. You and your racist friend. You and your racist friend.
This month at Live Oak, we are talking about the continuum between freedom and boundaries, because they have to work together in order to have the amount of freedom we wish to have. We have to have some boundaries in place. It can get complicated, and that brings us to the paradox of tolerance. Maybe you've had some arguments about this over the years as people who were for intolerance accused you of not being tolerant of their intolerance. It's okay to own that. It's okay to say absolutely, and to reference Karl Popper, who specifically talked about this paradox of tolerance. As you heard in today's reading, he spoke openly about the fact that was just a necessity, that you could not have completely open tolerance in which we were tolerant to absolutely everything, because at a certain point you cross the line and become tolerant to intolerance itself. And in Popper's view, at a certain point when we do that, the intolerance can then take control and we're left with no freedom, no tolerance. But where exactly should that line be where we say, okay, this is too much intolerance, we have to draw a line? That's the conundrum. That's the conundrum that Karl Popper was talking about, and it is the one that we are dealing with today. Popper felt that we should avoid trying to enforce this boundary through laws or through force, as long as we can counter them by rational argument and keep them in check by popular opinion. The problem is, when Popper was writing this, it was before the internet, it was before social media, it was before 24-hour news and unfettered talk radio. Over the past 5 years, we have indeed seen forces of intolerance that would seek to destroy tolerance if given the power to do so. Public opinion has not been an effective deterrent, and at this point, absolute lies and propaganda can be put out there on the news stations with no recourse. And so, yes, I do think that it's time for us to put in some boundaries, and boundaries aren't boundaries without consequences. The good thing is we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can look at things that we had before, like the fairness doctrine that was through the Federal Communications Commission, that required there to be some balance in how things were reported, as well as a commitment to truth and facts. Where public opinion has worked as an enforcer, ironically, has been in the spaces where we most need tolerance. It's not surprising. We, the last 5 years as a society, we have been highly anxious. And whenever a system is in anxiety, it can be in a family, an organization, or an entire country. But whenever that whole system is in anxiety and the individuals along with it, we tend to overemphasize the danger that we feel. Something as simple as someone disagreeing with us can feel like a threat and can bring out that fight or flee impulse. And when we are going through something as a society, where the difference in moral values is as stark as it has been over the last 5 years. We feel a drive for togetherness, to be with like-minded people. And there's nothing wrong about that. That has been what has helped to fuel the resistance. The problem is if we get into those spaces of togetherness with like-minded people and we react with anxiety whenever anyone within that circle doesn't toe the party line, then it means that we are restricting that circle smaller and smaller, and we are restricting the very ideas that we're going to come across. This is why it is imperative that we have a space for tolerance. So what is tolerance anyway? It's kind of funny that we, the religion that once touted freedom, reason, and tolerance as being the unifying values of our religion, we have thrown away tolerance. It's understandable because what happened was, in my opinion, kind of a misuse of the very concept. And that's why it's important that we take a pause and define, okay, what actually do we mean by tolerance? What is it an alternative to? And where does it fit in the scheme of things? Over the last 20 years, Unitarian Universalist congregations were the place to be if you were part of the queer community. This was a place where we could go and feel safer about being there with our partners, or if we were trans, being our authentic selves. And at a certain point, people began saying, well, hey, I don't just want to be tolerated. That's not enough. That's pretty close to the whole, love the sinner, hate the sin. I want to be welcomed. I want to be accepted. I want to be affirmed. And that is all well and good, and that is absolutely as it should be. We should have a space that is for acceptance and agreement and affirmation. The problem is we threw the baby out with the bathwater. We began seeing tolerance as an alternative to acceptance, rather than what it really is. Tolerance is an alternative to intolerance. It's a space where we don't necessarily agree, but we can still come together because it is also not the space of intolerance. So again, let's be really clear as we are defining what tolerance is, to first start with what it is not. Tolerance is not acceptance, it's not agreement, it's not affirmation, it's not assent, it's not approval, it is not even support. Tolerance is the space, it may be uncomfortable, but it is the space where we do not have to condemn an idea or a concept or what someone is saying or the language that they are using. Tolerance is not the space of acceptance, but it's also not the space of intolerance. And that space is important too. There are many things that we should be intolerant of. The problem is we threw out the whole concept of tolerance, and so now there are only two choices, either complete agreement or absolute condemnation. And doesn't it often feel like that? Doesn't it feel like those are the two choices, the only two choices that we have? Either nope or yes. That gives us no space to grow. That gives us no exposure to new ideas, and it removes a lot of our choices. One of our members recently, name withheld to protect the innocent, posted a picture on Facebook. Yes, that is a picture of chocolate-covered pickles. I find the picture disgusting. I am repulsed. I wrote in comments and I said, hey, I'm trying to write a sermon on tolerance and this picture makes it really difficult. Exactly. That's the point. Tolerance isn't supposed to be easy. What's that old line, about, if it was easy, everyone would be doing it. Tolerance is difficult, and it is supposed to be difficult. Tolerance is where we sit uncomfortably with people who have different opinions than we do and like different things than we are and choose to live their lives in different ways than we do. A space for tolerance means that I can be there, and I don't try to say that chocolate-covered pickles have no right to exist or that there is something wrong with the people who like those pickles. I can be there in this circle of people who absolutely love chocolate-covered pickles, and they can be who they are, and I can be who I am. And sure, they may invite me, even encourage me to give it a try, but I still get to make my own choice. I am not a bad person for not trying that. They are not bad people for eating that and liking that. Of course, I am back to self-differentiation, which is a key part of tolerance, and it's a key part of emotional maturity. Being able to be who I fully am and allowing other people to be who they fully are. And the circle of tolerance also gives me room to change and experiment. And it could be that after 20 people whose opinions I really respect say, I know it sounds weird, but it tastes actually really good, you should try it, I might be willing to give it a try. And I might not. It's my choice. And if I try it, I may say, it's just as disgusting as I thought. And I can do that. I get to decide within that circle of tolerance. The alternative, again, is not agreement or affirmation or acceptance. The alternative is intolerance. And in the circle of intolerance, there is only one right answer, and there is no self-differentiation. Either you are completely a wrong person, a bad person for not being willing to try this or not being willing to like it, or you are a bad person because you like this disgusting thing. That is intolerance. Tolerance counters that and says we can have this middle space between agreement and condemnation. So, chocolate-covered pickles may be an easy one to take on, but let's take on something different. Let's take on something real. Because it's also important to acknowledge this. The circle of tolerance requires humility and it requires vulnerability. And we need more of both as we try to make sense of everything. Things are changing very rapidly. And I'm not talking about things like the pandemic, which frankly isn't changing as rapidly as we would like. I'm talking about the cultural mores that especially over the past 5 years, the speed at which they change has been rapidly accelerating. And often we need some space to try and figure out some things, to look at things that we have done in the past and make a decision about whether we should make a change or an alteration. The first characteristic of liberal religion, according to James Luther Adams, is that we understand that revelation is continuous. We're always learning new things and developing new ideas and new understandings of the world. But it doesn't happen overnight. Revelation is continuous, speaks to an evolution. And evolution is a process. And there is not a definitive guide to everything that is good and right in the world. If there were, I would be the first one trying to memorize it. We got to figure it out on our own, but when I say on our own, I don't mean individually. Some of the best decision making and discussion comes in a group. So let me be vulnerable and share with you where I am on one of these specific language things. Metaphors using the words dark and light. To me, this is complex, and it depends on the context in which the words are being used. Now, for some people, it's not complex at all. There are some people that say use all the words and there should be no limitations, or even questioning why we use certain metaphors. And there are also the people that specifically with this would say dark has been used as a pejorative historically, and light has been used to mean good, and therefore we should never use those metaphors, period. Like I said, for me, it's more complex. I do try to avoid using dark to mean bad. For instance, I try to not say dark humor. Instead, I will speak of morbid humor. However, the metaphor of light breaking through a dark night or a dark storm so that visibility is increased and we can see with more clarity, that is a metaphor that is ancient and I think still speaks to us. And the verdict is not out on using those metaphors. At Joe Biden's inauguration, poet Amanda Gorman shared her poem in which she said, "When day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it, for there is always light if only we're brave enough to see it." And so I, at this point, still use it as a metaphor, even as it brings in the words of dark and light, even as it brings in bodily metaphor. I still think that it is powerful. And I equally believe that the metaphors around dark and night as being a place of mystery and safety are powerful. So I try to use the metaphor in both ways. Night coming tenderly black like me. And we saw this last December for Advent. Rather than having our weekly ritual be one of lighting the candles, instead we extinguished the candles and spoke about that power of the dark. Both and. This year, every month with our themes, we have been trying to move away from binary thinking, right and wrong, this and that, and instead move toward continuum thinking. And tolerance is part of the continuum that we need between intolerance and agreement and affirmation. We need that middle space, and we need it to be as wide as it can be. And the continuum includes intolerance. And just as we have a box for tolerance, for all that we are going to be willing to tolerate, even if we are uncomfortable with it, we absolutely should have a box for intolerance, for the ideas that actually impact another person's safety and well-being. And for things like the false debates about things that are already established through science and through study. Yes, COVID-19 is real, and critical race theory is based on the reality that white supremacy is baked into our culture and our institutions. And the debates about those things should go into, at least in our own space, should go into that box of intolerance. We don't have time for that. Also, what should go in that box of intolerance is anything that goes against our first principle, in which we affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of all people. And there are other things, beautiful, life-giving, life-affirming things that should go not just in the box for tolerance, but in the box for acceptance and affirmation and agreement. Agreement is very important. Agreement is often the place where we can get the most work done, is when we find those places of agreement. But in order to find those places of agreement, we first have to walk through that middle space of tolerance. We may not like everything that is within that space. We may not agree with everything that is within that space, but we can tolerate it. In the space of tolerance, there is the room for continuous revelation. In the space of tolerance, we can move in with curiosity, not feeling that we have to react to the anxiety that gets stirred up in us, not feeling that we have to make a decision. Do we agree or do we condemn this? And in the space for tolerance, that's where we really get to practice love. Loving someone who agrees with you on everything is easy. Maybe easy shouldn't be our goal. My choices are not limited to nope or yes. Is also a choice.
anointed by God, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream. We'll build a land where we bring the good tidings to all the afflicted and all those who mourn, and we'll give them gardens instead of ashes. Oh, we'll build a land where peace is born. Come, build a land where all the people, anointed by God, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream. Come, build a land where the mantles of praises resound from spirits once faint and once weak, where like oaks of righteousness strengthen people. Oh, come build the land, my people we seek. Come build a land where all of the people, anointed by God, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream. And the day will arise when we will be together, and no longer will we live in fear. And the children will smile without wondering whether on that day thunder clouds will appear. Wait and see what a world there can be if we share, if we care, you and me. Wait and see